Hi and welcome. We're now into, Chapter 2, Week 3. In this chapter, we're going to explore a few theoretical perspectives in the study of gender. Not everyone is going to see the value of all the theories, and that's fine. They are not very practical or not very real for everybody. And then too many of them might make sense, and maybe only one makes sense. So don't worry about saying you have to go stand behind every one of these. It's really just about theories, and I'll walk through a little bit more of this as we get going. So even though there's a lot and there can be confusing as to which one do I have to buy into or anything like that, however, these theories are derived from research, and it's an important piece. They're derived from research, and ultimately they are data-driven, fact-based, and can influence many areas of our lives. They can include, social policy, laws, our education, even our personal lives and perspectives. So one thing to consider when looking at theories is to imagine theories as wearing different colored sunglasses. Each different colored pair gives a slightly different view of the landscape. Like sunglasses, theories are differing views of what's being studied, not that any one theory is more right or more correct. However, some theories have more research and studies compiled to strengthen their theory. So going forward, remember, these theories are research-based and have been studied for many years. You don't need to accept them all. I just ask that you do your best to try on a pair of sunglasses and look around. Try to understand. Try on another pair and look around. And maybe one will suit you better than others, or maybe you can see the value of several. Theories will help us gain a more rounded understanding of the world around us, based on facts and research rather than belief without foundation. Now, this is a class in which you can explore topics of gender, culture, and communication. So let's begin with the theoretical approaches to gender. And we'll start with, what's a theory? A theory is a way of describing, explaining, or predicting relationships among phenomena or events in our everyday lives. We use theories to make sense of behaviors of both men and women. Theories about sex and gender affect our thoughts and our behaviors. Theories help us develop awareness about ourselves and the people we interact with daily, yearly, and throughout our lives. Now, we're going to explore 4 types of gender theories. We'll start with biological, where we're going to look at things like sex chromosomes, hormones, and brain structure to explore gender. Interpersonal, where we're going to look at the interpersonal relationships and the development of concepts of masculinity and femininity. We'll have a cultural view, looking at the larger influences of culture on gender. And then lastly, we'll have a critical versions of theories, which are looking at how oppressed groups can become empowered. So let's start with biological theories of gender. Biological theories focus on how sex chromosomes, hormones, and brain specialization affects individuals. Now, biological characteristics of sexes are based on difference. Sex chromosomes are the X and Y chromosome that determine if a person is male or female. Most people inherit one sex chromosome from each parent. Different genes, such as those that influence intelligence and social skills, are thought to reside in different chromosomes. Because men and women have different chromosomal makeup, they have different possibilities for gene expression. Now, most females are XX chromosome based, and most males are XY. Men are more prone to hereditary conditions than women. Single Y carries condition genes and not connected to the second Y. 2 X's are more likely to have one that overrides a conditioned gene. Now, if you look at in your text, exploring gendered lives for chromosomal variations in your text, you'll see some broader examples of how that impacts chromosomal makeup of people. Now, the second component is that of hormones, and it also plays an important role in biological theories. Hormones influence skills and tendencies. For example, girls can favor trucks if the mother has high levels of testosterone during pregnancy. That just testosterone as a hormone can influence a child's behavior in terms of what's in them. Hormones influence tendencies associated with gender. Males given estrogen can experience a decline in spatial skills and an increase in verbal skills, or men sprayed with oxytocin, that's the cuddle hormone, show more empathy and sensitivity. Estrogen is the primary female hormone and has been shown to have positive influences on cardiovascular functioning, to strengthen the immune system, to create greater deposits of fat around the hips and breasts, and to slow liver processing of alcohol. Testosterone, the primary male hormone, has been shown to have hormonal cycles, has been linked to violence, aggression, and changes in cognitive functioning. Men's hormonal changes later in life is more gradual than women's, and testosterone tends to gradually begin to decline in men and around about 30 years of age. Now, testosterone deficiency can lead to an increase in body fat and moodiness and depression. So we've seen a bit on how chromosomes can influence, and then we can see how hormones can influence. So now let's look at the differences in brain structures and development. Each sex specializes in one side of the brain, the left or the right. Now, while research has shown that women and men use both the left and the right lobes of their brains, the sexes tend to be specialized in using different lobes. Men tend to emphasize left brain functioning, responsible for traditionally linear thinking, sequential information, spatial skills, and abstract analytical reasoning. Women tend to specialize on the right brain functioning, responsible for imaginative, artistic activities, holistic, intuitive thinking, and some visual functions. Now, there's a brain part that joins or links these two lobes. It's called the corpus callosum, and it links the two lobes of the brain, and women tend to have a greater ability to use. It allows the crossing over of the lobe because they have a more dense corpus callosum. This may explain why women tend to do better at memory, social skills, and juggling tasks more than men. Now, if you check in your text, please read the example of David Reimer. I've got a picture up on the slide behind me. In your text, as his experience emphasizes the forces of biology that are evident in gender reassignment cases. Because his is a unique one. It wasn't like he chose to do this. It was something done early in his life. Now, biological classification into male and female is not as clear-cut as many people think. The term gender binary refers to the division of humans into two sexes that are presumed to be opposites, distinct, and natural. One of the earliest challenges to gender binary came out of research on intersex people. Other research has noted that there is more variation within each socially defined sex than between the two. The term gender queer was developed to signify identities outside the gender binary. So men and women, gender queer is everything that's in between or on the outsides. When we start looking at interpersonal theories of gender, we'll start with the psychodynamic theory of gender development, which emphasizes interpersonal relationships within a family. The first relationship influences how we define our lives and define our identity according to the according to the psychodynamic. This includes gender identity. The most infants are cared for by women are mothers, and that's the first point of contact for most in terms of our relationship forming. Mothers may act differently towards daughters and sons based on their own upbringing and social views. Infants following distinct developmental paths that reflect the relationship with mother. There's been a fundamental likeness between mother and daughters. They interact more with daughters, that is, mothers tend to keep daughters closer physically and psychologically. They're more nurturing because of the identification with their mother. That is, the young daughters identify more with their mothers. Sons and mothers, they recognize a fundamental difference between themselves, which leads to a greater separation. Mothers encourage more and earlier independence and talk less about emotional matters. Sons thus associate independence and autonomy with relationships. Identity is not fixed. We grow and change as we journey through life. As infants mature, they carry with them basic identity formed in their first relationships with mother and, of course, also then with dad. So next, we're going to review psychological theories of gender, starting with social learning. Their claim is that we learn to be masculine and feminine by imitating others and getting responses for our behavior. Reinforcement of gendered roles and behaviors occurs when people around the children reward some behaviors appropriate for one's gender and react neutrally or negatively to others. So your little boy is playing cowboys and Indians and is playing in a very male, sort of traditionally masculine way, taking control, developing leadership, and you reward them saying, hey, that's great the way you're playing. He starts to recognize that this is what I'm supposed to do. As soon as they sit down and play with the Barbie, we might either ignore and not say anything, or we might say, hey, put that down and start playing with the truck. Now we've given communication about what's appropriate for masculinity as opposed to what's not appropriate for masculinity. So children imitate communication seen in the media and by others. So media plays a very big role in teaching children what roles are rewarded for girls and what roles are rewarded for boys. Children are inundated with messages. As parents, we are probably not as aware how much we influence the way we teach our children about what's masculine and what's feminine. And we'll come back to that when we look at gender more specifically. So social learning theory suggests that reinforcement processes continue throughout a lifetime and views children as passive in this process. Now, to contradict that, the cognitive development theory, children are seen as having an active role to play in the development of gender identity by picking models of competency for masculine and feminine behavior. Children go through several stages in developing identity. From birth to about 24 to 30 months, it involves noticing how others communicate labels and describe them. That's the first stage of getting to knowing what it is I am, male or female, boy or girl, masculine or feminine. By age 3, maybe a little earlier, children realize being boy or girl is not temporary. This is known as gender constancy, and it's the point at which a child recognizes that his or her gender is relatively unchanging. It's at this point children are motivated to learn to be competent in their gender. They do this by observing same-sex role models to see what behaviors and attitudes and feelings they are associated with being in their gender. I used to be a behavior consultant and go into daycares quite frequently to do observations of children. And it was very easy to see the difference in children when they were playing house as to what was life like in their house, because you could see them, they were using what they had seen as how moms and dads interact with their children as the way that they played. Gender constancy can be more challenging for children who do not identify with their assigned sex and gender expectations. And we see this coming forward more in recent years, where people are less concerned with boys that seem to be very feminine and girls who seem to be very masculine, allowing there to be more variation. Now, gender schema theory. Gender schema is an internal mental framework. It's the way we organize the world around us, and these different schemas, or these different categories of understanding the world around us, Gender schema is like an internal mental framework for categorizing our perceptions and directing behavior related to gender. This helps children recognize what clothes am I supposed to wear, what toys can I play with, what activities should I be doing, what traits should I adapt, and the roles are appropriate for each sex. So within the first year, the infant distinguishes between male and female faces and voices. By age 2, children use schema of gender to organize their understandings. And because they're young, they get very black and white. It's not until we're into 10, 11, 12, 13 that we start to generalize and maybe see there's a gray area. So let's jump ahead to cultural theories. Cultural theories examine the larger influence of culture on the development of identity. Culture theories represent a fairly comprehensive approach to gender development as they incorporate other theories within the broader context of society at a particular moment in time. So for example, first we'll start with anthropology. Anthropological theories examine how various cultures construct and express gender. And this is important because in North America, we tend to forget that there's other parts of the world that might view their citizens differently. So many societies have conceptions of gender that are different significantly from those currently held in North America. So for example, and this might surprise you, Australian Aboriginal fathers have no say in their daughters' marriages. That's just the way the understanding of gender is to Aboriginals in Australia. Germany, New Zealand, Nepal, and Australia legally recognize more than two genders. More than two genders. This is reminding us that genders are socially constructed, because if genders weren't socially constructed, why do different cultures have different definitions of gender, or more definitions of gender? There are also cultures with 5 different genders legally described. In the Dominican Republic, some males are born with underdeveloped organs, sex organs, as it's not that uncommon in some parts of the Dominican Republic. These boys would then be raised as what is known as conditional girls. They dress in dresses. They are treated like girls. But during puberty, a flush of hormones promotes sexual maturity, and testes drop and penis grow, and now they're accepted as boys. No ill feelings, no finger pointing, no nothing. It's just the way things are in that culture. Okay. Second, we're going to look at, in cultural, would be this symbolic interactionalism theory, which emphasizes the process through which individuals learn to participate in society, and then they internalize its values through communicating with others. So their thinking is, of course, that we learn everything through the interaction we have with all the people in our lives. They help us determine what we internalize and what we understand about the world around us. When you get married and you and your partner have children, and then you celebrate Christmas, you will each take what you've learned in your own Christmas celebration, and there may be a dialogue that needs to happen as to how do these blend and make them together. Symbolic interactionalism would be the symbols that you represent in your Christmas and the symbols that they represent in their Christmas, and how each of you understand those experiences, and then get brought into a new family. So through communication with others, we learn who we are. That includes our gender identity, the messages that I received from my mom and dad, and how they communicated to me about the things that I did that were good for being a boy, or good for being, in my sister's case, for being a girl. Those are the things that were the initial way of us understanding who we were in terms of our identity, including our gender identity. And as parents interact with children, they'll tell them who they are. Each label offers the child an awareness of their self-image. Children internalize views to arrive at understanding play with peers and teachers' interactions with students are key ways that our culture and cultures view gender and communicating to children. Roles are important for understanding cultural theories of gender. A role is a set of expected behaviors and values associated with them. Roles are external to the individual. You aren't born with a role other than son or daughter, but you're not born with the role of student. Student is what you gain when you go to school, and then those are outside of you. And roles are assigned by society. So for example, gender roles assume women as caretakers are represented in service and clerical jobs. Men in executive positions. Women tend to ask to take care of social activities. Men regarded as breadwinners. Now the current recession that we had, or the session from the 2008, and certainly historically, is when the economic circumstances change in the world or in your community or in your culture, then some of those roles change. So critical theories, this is the fourth type of theory, critical theories of gender. Now, different from the other theories, critical theories direct attention to structures and practices by which societies classify people. They're interested in how dominant groups of privilege their own interest and impose less privilege to the less powerful. Understanding how oppressed groups can become empowered. Critical theories have a political edge to them. Now, the first one we'll look at is what's known as standpoint theory, and it notes that societies are made of different groups and have varied amounts of power and privilege. It focuses on how membership in different groups shapes what individuals' experiences are. For example, gender, race, class, and sexual identity. Now, this theory has three different primary claims. First, all points of view about social life are partial. So, if I'm rich and you're poor, my view of the world is only partial because of where I stand at the top of the hill. Your view will be partial because of where you stand. So, all points of view in the social life are partial. Some perspectives, this is two, some perspectives are more limited than others. You can imagine at the top of the hill, my options are not very limited, whereas at the bottom of the hill, my options might be much more limited. 3, standpoint is earned by developing political awareness of power differences among social groups. So it really emphasizes the role of political influence, that those who are rich got there for more than just their own well-doing. It could have been a political influence in terms of the advantages that were brought towards some people over others. Societies are made up of different groups that are organized in a social hierarchy. Membership in groups shapes what individuals experience. So marginalized people can generate unique insights on how a society works by offering perspectives outside the cultural center. Some theorists assert that for survival, those in subordinate positions must understand their own positions as well as the individuals with more power. So they're saying those at the bottom tend to have a bit more perspective than those at the top, because they've had to understand not only where they live, but understand the inequity in power. And that's the source of where this can also affect positive change. We all occupy multiple social locations and can earn or develop multiple standpoints that overlap and interact. Standpoint theory helps us understand gender by pointing out how membership in a particular group shapes individuals' experiences, their perspectives, identities, and abilities. Now, under the same umbrella is what's known as queer performative theory. Now, you'll find there's 3 examples in your book that you can check out just to sort of get a feel for this theory. Now, this class of theories looks at people who defy conventional identity categories for sex, gender, and sexual identity. They suggest that it troubles our thinking, and it's that trouble that is productive. So it's It's a challenging theory insofar as it looks for the non-conforming groups and sort of says, let's use that to help educate people and be more productive. Queer theory challenges the way a culture defines and polices what it considers normal and abnormal in relation to sexuality. Queer theory is a critique of conventional categories of identity and culture views of normal and abnormal, heterosexuality, heteronormativity. You'll find it in your textbook. Sorry if I'm tripping over the words. I find that I prepare on my script, but I do make these mistakes from time to time. It would happen if I was in class. So find that in your text and you'll see what it means. The word queer does not refer only to gays and lesbians. It also refers to anything that departs from what society considers normal and challenges what is considered normal and abnormal. Not useful to use terms like women or men, gay, straight. Identities are shaped by numerous factors, so naming somebody according to a single factor is misleading, according to them. It assumes identities are not fixed, relatively fluid, in fact they are. It means more than being able to switch from one sex or gender to another can mean refusing to accept any stable sexual identity. So that's where you'll start to see in the description of LGBTQ issues, that acronym is actually 26 letters long if it were to be inclusive. And so it's showing the degree of fluidity. Next, under this same grouping would be performative theory. And it's through performance and expression that humans generate identity, including gender. Without performance, there is no gender. And by performance, they don't mean acting. Performance would be through the behavior of living your life. What you do on a daily basis that depicts your gender identity is your gender identity. Gender comes into being only as expressed. Gender is something we do at specific times. Gender is a verb, not a noun. And so these are important sort of differentiations. They express conventional gender through everyday practices. We resist conventional views of gender if we act in ways that are not considered with an assigned role. So performances are collaborative. We're not in a vacuum, but among others and receiving feedback. So these performances, when you meet somebody who's challenging your view of what men and women are and is not fitting the binary perspective, it's their behavior and the way that they hold themselves and interact with the world around them that is their performance of their gender identity. And it's that relationship of how we view them and they view us and how we interact with one another that is a part of that performance. Queer performative theories integrate views of queer and performative theory. Performances are means of challenging and destabilizing cultural categories and their attached values. It's important for performances that they are routine or everyday and serve as a political tool for that creates unsettling experiences. They want there to be they want everybody to be challenged and somewhat unsettled, because that sets the ground by which people can come to better understandings. So if we look at all this all put together, basically, theories, as I said, is like a bunch of sunglasses that you put on. Try them on. Theories work together and they shed light on how we develop and enact gender identities within a particular society, in a particular culture. And I hope you can see that not all and not every culture defines gender identities in the same manner, which means culture influences how we define gender identities. And it's the different languages and the way that cultures talk about gender identity that help with that definition, thus socially defined, not biologically determined. All right, everybody, let's keep up the good work. Bye now.